Good afternoon. My name is James Ragland, and I am proud to serve as the chair of the Audit and Accountability Committee for the Columbus City Schools Board of Education. I'm here today with co-chair, Madam Carol Beckerly, as well as our board president, Ms. Jennifer Adair. Madam Auditor, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Mr. Ragland,
Here.
Ms. Beckerly,
Here.
Mr. Grant, Mr. Grant,
Here.
Mr. Vajon, Ms. Adair,
Here.
and Mr. Jordan.
Here.
And you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Auditor. Our first order of business today is to approve the minutes from last month's meeting. Those minutes were sent to you through email prior to today's meeting before we call for a vote. Are there any questions or clarifications regarding the minutes? Seeing none, I now entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved by Mr. Jordan. Is there a second?
Yes, I
A
second.
second.
I got a second from Mr. Grant. Thank you, sir. Madam Auditor, please call the roll.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Adair,
Yes.
and Mr. Jordan.
Yes.
And that motion carried.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I'd like to ask the committee if they could please turn their attention to today's agenda. I need to make a clarification and a change to today's agenda. You will see on the current agenda, item number 2 says Office of Internal Audit Report. I would like to replace item number 2 with what is listed on the agenda as item number 3. So item number 3 would go to item number 2, and item number 2 becomes legal compliance and risk management. And then item number 3 becomes the Office of Internal Audit Report. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve today's agenda with those articulated changes.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Grant. It has been moved and properly seconded to approve today's agenda with articulated changes. Madam Auditor, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Beckerly,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Adair,
Yes.
Mr. Jordan,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
and that motion carried.
Thank you. We will now move to item number 2 on today's agenda, legal compliance and risk management. Madam Auditor, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Chair Ragland. With COVID-19 impacting every aspect of almost every business, I thought this would be a really appropriate time to have a couple of updates, some that were scheduled on our calendar activity and some that were not. We are going to be hearing an update from our treasurer regarding major financial and accounting risk. And he gave a really good update to the board at our last meeting. And this report has also been thoroughly vetted through the Finance and Appropriations Committee. There might be some updates on CARES dollars and how we are either applying and spending those dollars in addition to other activity going on within the district. The next 2 reports, one from our Chief Information Officer, Ms. Birney, and one from our Chief Accountability Officer, Dr. Klein, I asked for because of, once again, the changes that COVID-19 is having on our operations and the different risks that we are facing in those areas. I do have a couple prepared notes, so just kind of bear with me. First of all, the district has more people who are accessing our systems off-site. We have more devices that are being taken home, and also there's a possibility that some of our staff are accessing our systems through their own personal devices. There are more bad actors out there that are targeting home use with links to fraudulent websites, trying to encourage people to download malware or to get access to sensitive information such as medical and financial information. And another concern that not just the district is facing, but also I'm quite sure other organizations are facing is how to make sure that the devices are getting patch updates and are being updated if those devices are not coming back into the district to log on to our systems to get those updates. And then finally, what type of security or what type of changes would have to be made if we are going to be doing attendance and also doing testing in a virtual environment. So those are just a few of the changes that we are facing. So I thought it would be a great opportunity to get an update from the two chiefs over those areas. So first we will hear from our chief financial officer, followed by our CIO, and then followed by our CAO, our chief academic officer. So I will turn it over, I guess, to Mr. Bahorek.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right. So the update that I've been asked to give is on two areas here. One is our departmental risk assessment. The other is on our federal assistance that is available to us as a result of the pandemic. We're about 3 weeks into a departmental risk assessment, and the genesis of this has been a kind of a longstanding request and recommendation that we perform a risk, within our own department. The goals and what we set out to do for this risk assessment was clearly to identify specific risks that are present in our office and then prioritize those goals. We expect to get some recommendations regarding those goals and where we might have to do some digging deeper into the risks and assessing their potential impact. We're going to look at some new controls potentially depending upon the outcome of our review. We're learning through this whole process how to conduct a risk assessment, and then maintaining this risk assessment will be important because, as we all know, this isn't just a one and done deal when it comes to something like risk assessment. The primary goal of this work was to identify risks and measure what we're calling inherent risk, and that is assessing risks that we identify and the likelihood and the impact that risk would have and the likelihood that it would occur before any of our current controls are taken into consideration. And then we were to, through a self-assessment approach, look at our controls and then reevaluate or rescore those risks to determine a evaluate the efforts that we've put into place or have into place to mitigate those risks. So we're looking at two different risks, inherent, that is those that exist, and assess the likelihood and magnitude without any controls. And then the residual risk is that risk after we've implemented some controls and put those in place. All of the risks that we are discussing in the department will be scored according to this scale. You can see that there's the frequency of risk, or the likelihood that that risk might occur, and then also the impact of that, all the way from a slight impact to a detrimental impact to the district. Those are scored. 1 is very low, 7 is a very high, and then it's additive, such that a very low score would be 2, and the highest score possible would be 2 7s or a 14. The evaluation of controls that we do on a self-assessment basis fall out of these combined scores. So residual risk scores that are less than 3 would be deemed effective, that the controls are in fact effective at reducing the inherent risk. And then partially effective would be somewhere in that 3 to less than 5 range of a residual risk score. And then greater than or equal to a 5 score could be considered that the controls that we have in place are ineffective at reducing and addressing that residual risk. At this point, like I said, we're about 3 weeks into this project. We've identified 147 risk items that we're evaluating over 12 functional areas. Those 12 functional areas you can see here on the left-hand side of the chart. And that scoring system then results in a heat map. And you can see that green tends to be favorable, red is unfavorable. So you go from very low to high in terms of a heat map. Again, this is what this looked like, I think last week. And I've been reviewing all the scores and making some adjustments along the way. But this just gives you an idea of the outcome that we might expect from this project. And then you can see there too, not only are the various scores here, but the effectiveness of the controls is evaluated as well on a heat map like this. In addition to scoring the risks on inherent and residual risk, we're also categorizing all these risks into areas that are listed here: compliance, operational, financial, reputational, fraud, and technological, just to give us another look at, after we do this analysis, where do our risks lie in these categories? And the idea behind the heat map and all this scoring is to identify areas where perhaps additional controls are needed to be put in place, and really to help focus our attention of our future work. As I said when I started, this is a learning process for the department. We've not ever done this before. So as we go through it, we're learning how to think about risk, how to look at it in terms of likelihood and impact. And then it also gives us a chance to consider controls that we have in place. So again, it's a huge learning process for us. And we should have this project done by the 1st of September, and we'll be able to report out on that. So I'll pause for a moment if anyone on the committee has a question about the risk assessment before I move on to the federal assistance discussion.
Stan, are we just seeing this for process, or are we asking questions about content?
I'm sorry, what was that again?
Actual risks. Is this just being presented to us so we can see what you're doing, or do you want us to actually talk about the substance? If I saw an orange block, I want to ask you about.
Well, can you wait till we're done with the whole process?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So this was to be more conceptual than it was detailed.
Got it.
Because quite frankly, I don't have the details in front of me. So if you ask me, it would take me a while to pull all that up. But like I said, we're almost to the end. But when we get there, we'll have identified all the risks, and they're all spelled out in a spreadsheet. So you can see.
September 1st is fine.
Okay.
Stan, this is Greg. A question maybe for you and Carolyn both. Do those processes that you're listed on your spreadsheet, those match, Carolyn, your audit universe?
A lot of them look familiar, and Stan, I apologize if this was sent out earlier, but I'm assuming that this pretty much ties to the the spreadsheet that we use when we come in to do the treasurer's office risk assessment for our work process, for our work plan?
Oh, we're certainly attempting to tie the two together, yes. I
Okay,
think ours is going to be, as it was described in the beginning, to us, probably very much more detailed than perhaps what your office does. Yours is a little bit higher overall risk assessment and identification. This gets down into risks such as, the risk that an accounts payable check will be cashed twice. Very specific list of risks.
okay. Yeah, they look familiar, so that's why I just want to make sure that they do line up very closely, if not almost exactly.
Yeah,
And
and if they're more granular, Carolyn, than your audit universe, because we would have the same thing. You would just want to have an exercise to show which ones map up to each of the individual units. That way, if you do an audit of accounts payable, it may be more than one process within accounts payable. You wouldn't need to hit all three, whatever there might be in that category.
Correct.
And I can wait as well, no problem.
Yeah, this, I say this somewhat tongue in cheek, but I'm sure this work will be kind of a full employment act for internal auditors as we identify that more granular risk. So I'll give you plenty of stuff to do. Okay, hearing no other questions, let's go on and talk about the federal assistance that's been made available to pretty much all school districts as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Most of this comes through the CARES Act that you're all familiar with. And we put this table together starting at that point in time. We put this together probably a month ago, I think a month ago. And it starts with what we knew as most certain then down to the least certain, or that which has yet to be determined or detailed out to us. And I identify here how the money is coming to us. So the first line, ESSER funds are coming to us federal through the state. The state was allotted a little over $30 billion, or I'm sorry, the federal ESSER fund was $30.75 billion. Not sure how much the state got, but we were allocated $28.4 million. That's net of about $2.5 million that's going to go to non-public schools that will be channeled through us. So you may see somewhere that it says that Columbus Schools got 31 million roughly, but that's including the non-public. But here, I just wanted to list what the district was going to receive. So 28.4 million there. And again, all of this has to do with pandemic-related purchases. So you can see that sanitizing and cleaning facilities, PPE is what we'll be spending that money on as well. So there's a whole laundry list of things that we'll be getting into. We had a task force formed for reopening of schools, and during that task force, as needs were identified, then we began to coordinate those or allocate those to various funding sources. And at that time, the primary source was this 28.4 million. Along in the process, then the CRF, or the Coronavirus Relief Fund, was identified, 150 billion at the federal level. Of that, we're receiving about 3.8 million. And the interesting thing, probably most notable here, while the allowable expenditures are very, very similar, the time frame in which we must spend these funds is different. The ESSER funds, the first funds we knew we were getting, we have 2 years to spend that. We have to spend that by September of 21. I'm sorry, September of 22. But these CRF funds, the 3.8 million, we must expend by December 30th of this year. So we will align our expenditures to spend these dollars first, and the CARES Act, the ESSER fund second. But in fact, we have so much in the way of expenditures related to our response to COVID and getting schools open that these will be pretty much spent simultaneously, but we'll be sure that we spend our 3.8 million in CRF funds by that December 30th deadline. And it is December 30th. Whoever wrote the federal law must have forgotten that we have 31 days in December, but it is December 30th, the right date. The third item also, now this is interesting, it's federal through the city, so it's kind of federal to the state to the city. The city also received a portion of funds for the coronavirus relief fund. And out of their portion, and this is what you read about in the paper, allocated to us 7.15 million, and we turned around and bought, I believe it was 20,000 Chromebooks with that to aid in our endeavors to get to one-to-one on technology with our students and families. So that's what that 7.15 million is going to be used for. That has been allocated and ordered, I think delivered, being prepped for delivery. The IT folks on the line, if you got any questions about that, they can fill you in. But that particular purchase has been executed. And we have budgets set up for the ESSER and our own CRF funds as well. So that's available now for expenditure. The fourth item on the list is the Broadband Ohio Connectivity Grant. Another 150 billion allocation, or and then 50 million came to the state. That's on a application basis, grant award basis. So you make an application for these funds. The maximum was set at 250,000 per district. And in the beginning, it was a matching one-to-one dollar matching grant program. A week or so ago, they took the matching grant program out. That's why I lined through that. And then I recently heard that the applications have been just streaming in, and we could perhaps expect that if we're awarded a grant, that it won't be the 250K max. It'll get prorated in order to spread that 50 million out across all the applications. So much smaller piece, but we're in line for those dollars as well. The last piece that's currently available is the Governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund, or GEAR funds as we're referring to them, a $3 billion federal allocation, of which 105 million came to the state of Ohio, and we have yet to hear about how that will be allocated to us, or how much would be allocated to public school districts. So those are the sources of federal funds and assistance that we have available to help defray the costs related to how we are addressing our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. There are several bills pending at the federal level. The last status I knew is that they are still pending. The HEROES Act, and there's another name very similar to that, I forget. But those are pending, and we don't, it's up to the feds to decide when they're going to pass that legislation. So, but these are the 4 well-known sources, one still pending, and then 2 pieces of legislation at the federal level. So, and we've got plenty of need and to spend these dollars, rest assured. So we're on top of this. Any questions?
And how were these accounted for? Do they come in as grants, or how are you treating those?
They're treated very similar to grants. They're in their own separate funds, and they all have a federal fund designation to them.
Okay. Yeah, well, one of the other boards I'm on, they received a series of the PPP loans, and they're going through as liabilities, and as they incur expenses, they're having a clean track between what's the PPP loan and what's hitting the income statement from allowable expenses, because of the point legal advice to them was at some point you very well could get audited and have a valid trail that matches what was in the theirs was in the loan for payroll and for other expenses. So, but it sounds like you guys have a very similar method to track allowable expenses against the grants.
Yeah, this is very segregated.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
To follow up on that, I think some of our clients, we've been having them treated as forgivable loans. And as they meet the conditions for forgiveness, then they're going to recognize them as revenues.
And understand that I know the loans that you're talking about, and these are, you know, just direct grants to us. These aren't loan. We don't have to. I know what you're talking about in terms of the forgivable loan part, and we're not participating in that program.
But there's no risk that if, well, it sounds like there's enough needs. It sounds like the risk is almost non-existent, that if they were to ask, well, where did you spend the money at, you'd definitely be able to show we incurred items that weren't in the budget for XYZ. You could show the cost of cleaning supplies and other types of items that would back up over the course of time.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we're treating this identical to how we treat other federal grants.
Great.
Well, hearing no other questions, I will turn this back over to you.
Thanks, Stan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Pahoric. And thank you, committee, for your questions here. Madam Auditor, we're moving forward in the process here. I believe our CIO is next in line today.
Yes. And I know I saw Miss Verney earlier. Oh, there she is.
There
Hi.
she is.
Hi,
Good afternoon, Miss Verney.
I'm here. I've been respectfully paying attention to what Stan's been telling us. Yeah, good afternoon, co-chairs, Board Member Ragland and Board Member Beckerly, President Adair and Ms. Smith, and the Audit Committee. You know, in the spring, I came and presented in front of you about what we were doing for distribution. At the time, what we knew was the risk that existed and how we were trying frantically, if you will, to mitigate some of that risk because we didn't have a lot of data come back. So I'm glad we did what we did in the spring because we have some solid data we can work off of and address some of the concerns. And you know, I'm going to share my presentation, but I hope you will ask me questions as we go. Feel free to interrupt. Okay. So I wanted to address this in two forms. One is, you know, around security, the identified and assessed risks since pandemic for Chromebooks for students and staff. You saw the treasurer's presentation. We had 7.515 million allocated from the City of Columbus's CARES Act fund, and we purchased 20,000 Chromebooks. You know, as responsible fiduciary officers of the district, we have a very extensive financial responsibility and risk, and especially when you're partaking in other government entity funds, that risk just, you know, multiplies manifold, and we need to be very, very careful around the security of these devices. And I wanted to address another facet, which would be the safety of these devices, to what Ms. Smith was earlier talking about, internal auditor Ms. Smith, you know, about patching, for instance, or, you know, how are we ensuring the safety of our online browsing, for instance, of our young people in the district. So I wanted to take it as two different aspects, a little unconventional. I'm not just going to go through a bulleted list, but I wanted to kind of say, hey, what are we trying to solve? How did we go about it? And what are we trying to do? So moving on to the security, you know, since we distributed Chromebooks, like I said, we've been collecting data. And also we've been collecting data on the number of Chromebooks that come to us as damaged or get reported as lost or stolen. We also heard of a handful of incidents where, you know, unfortunately, our Chromebooks have been pawned in pawn shops. And we've also seen about maybe a handful of incidents where we have repeat young people in our district that come for replacement, and we have replaced more than once their Chromebooks. And from what we can tell, right, this is by no means concrete, we don't have any concrete evidence. There is severe water and irreparable damages, and seems like it is intentional somewhat. And like I said, as it is a responsibility as financial stewards that our responsibility doesn't end with just loaning the devices and then saying, oh, virtual learning is happening. We have given us to every student in the district a device, and patting ourselves in the back. We need to ensure that we are tracking the safety and security of these devices as well. I'm sure Ms. Smith will appreciate that. I'm having. So what is our needs, right? One is the fiduciary responsibility for loan devices by parents. They're signing liability agreements, so they carry some of the fiduciary responsibility. And so we want to publish, we want to be able to publish a schedule of fines for lost, stolen, damaged. Of course, there will be no fines assessed if the lost or stolen is accompanied by a police report, because we don't want our students defending it if they're mugged or something. It's okay, let the Chromebook go. I care more about the safety of our students. So as long as the stolen Chromebooks are accompanied by a police report, I don't think we should assess fines. Again, all these are very preliminary, and we are having discussions with multiple teams, but just to draw the distinction, right? We care about the safety of the students too. So if there's a police report, then the fines may not exist, but if it is not accompanied by a police report, there will be fines assessed. And we also don't want the Chromebooks to end up in pawn shops, like we had a handful of them do, and cause not only negative publicity for the district, it just, we want to avoid situations like that. Let's put it simply like that. So our initial recommendation is, and I gathered a group of very learned people from across the organization that are experts in their fields, from accountability, Dr. Klein, from OIA, we had Mr. Kevin O'Connor invited. There was some conflict, but he did give us input. And I had the treasurer's office, Mr. Bahorek, and I had legal representation, and we tried to assess this situation from multiple angles and come up with some initial recommendations. Of course, I have to have multiple meetings before we can put a lot of this in operation, but I also have a timeline to share with you. So we are not only going to track what devices we have loaned. We did that in the spring. We did that very well. We did that with ODE's guidance, and we did that with OAI's guidance. We think we have that down pat. In fact, this time it's all going to be electronic. They're not going to even have to sign forms. They will verbally agree. We will record that, and then we will send them their agreement through the parent portal, and they'll sign it electronically and send it back to us. We also want to track returns. So as soon as somebody is asking for a replacement, we want to find out why they're asking for a replacement. Was it lost? Was it stolen? Was it damaged? So we can assess the right fines for it. And we will be publishing a detailed fine schedule. Right now, the fine schedule is, it's all or nothing. It's a Chromebook, it's a power charger, and accessories. And so there is no accounting for the level of damage, or it's a police report or not. So we will be working out on that detailed fine schedule. And we can also systemically, when I say systemically, using software, we can make these bricks useless, but we have to have that report of lost or stolen. Otherwise, we don't know who is using it. There's student logins. There's also guest login to allow parents to be using these devices. So if it's lost or stolen, we can make these Chromebooks unusable. It's like a brick, and it'll actually pop up a screen and say this Chromebook was stolen from the Columbus City Schools District. So that, there is no, we are discouraging any secondary market for our loan devices that might come up. And we are also working with our safety and security team to look at some options where we'll visit the pawn shops, show them our Chromebooks, and say, hey, this is our Chromebook from the city of Columbus City Schools looks like. I keep saying City of Columbus, I'm sorry. Columbus City Schools looks like, and please do not buy this. If it comes to you, you'll in fact be buying stolen property or something like that. We are not going to be offering to buying them back, thereby encouraging them to indulge in that fencing, if you will. We're just going to tell them, understand this is stolen property. If it looks like this, it comes with these tags, it belongs to the Columbus City Schools. So these are some of the things we're discussing.
Quick question, if I may. This is Greg.
Sure.
Is there not a way to engrave the Chromebooks property of CCS so that if they were to be taken someplace, they'd be very clearly marked?
We are labeling them clearly. I don't know if we can engrave them. We're labeling them very clearly, and it will come up on the screen if they log in as anything other than the student login or guest login. They'll have to know that. But no, we haven't engraved them yet. But there'll be clear identification that this belongs to us. And yeah, but we also want to visit these places and tell them this is how it looks, and this is how you will identify that it belongs to us. Even though it's clear, we don't want to leave any question for doubt.
Okay, thank you.
And what was the data points used? I polled the Council of Greater City Schools. I asked multiple CIOs what they were doing. And they all kind of were working on the same approach as we are. And then we took IT help desk tickets to see about multiple replacements being given to the same student and why. And we actually had parent calls too. So we took all this into consideration while we made these decisions. We didn't just make it out of assumptions. We use actual data and try to come up these recommendations. We will review them. We will reconvene and make a final recommendation in the next 2 weeks. And we expect to be implementing all these recommendations by end of September. I can still take questions on the security itself before I move on to safety, if anybody has any further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Vierny. I would like to welcome Board Member Dr. Tina Pierce, who has joined us today. She was not recognized before we got started with your report, but Dr. Pierce is here, and I want to make sure that she is properly acknowledged before you move forward. But thank you, and please continue, Ms. Vierny.
Thank
Ernie,
you.
I do have one more question, if you don't mind.
Yes,
Sure.
sir, please go.
On all, I guess broadly, all the Chromebooks that the students have, the new ones and teachers have in use, are they all kept current with the software patches for currency to minimize vulnerabilities? And how was that managed?
I was going to address that in the safety section.
Okay, perfect. I'll just wait.
No problem. No problem. And if you still have questions after I have talked to those, then absolutely, please feel free. I'm here to provide the information that'll help us all make the right decisions. So, safety, right? We've had. We're trying to figure out this whole virtual learning thing. And like I said, I'm so thankful we had the spring so we could collect the data and act upon it. And we have several parents that have called the district wondering, hey, how can I ensure, that my kids are having a safe online experience, right? When learning or, there is no predators out there. How are you ensuring the safety of my online presence for my children and at home? And we've also had some student emails trying to send out inappropriate material as spam. When I say inappropriate, it is, inappropriate. I will not elaborate on that. I'm sure you'll get the hint. So as responsible educators, right, again, our responsibility does not end with providing this technology. We also need to ensure the safety of their learning experiences. Last spring, when we went with this, right, we had content filtering and we had, Content Keeper and other software we used. But most of them worked very well on-prem when the students were in the school buildings, right? When they're out of the school buildings, we had to rely on that partnership with the parents to make sure the parents were exercising parental controls, because we had no way to do that when they were off-prem. So we learned that very quickly. So I have some exciting news. Again, let's look at the district needs. We need safety of our students in the virtual learning space. And parental engagement has to be there. We still need them as our partners in ensuring the safety of our students in the virtual learning space, but we have put some additional systemic controls. Again, the data points where we gathered from multiple school districts across the nation. The Council of Greater City Schools has about 72 school districts participating. And, again, parent calls, help desk. we researched into multiple tools available to do this remotely, to your question, Mr. Jordan. And then we also went to Gartner and validated our tool selection. Gartner is a IT research firm. They kind of validate your selection saying, hey, are you at par? Are you going with somebody who is not even in the radar in their magic quadrant? So we validated those things, and we are ready to implement some risk mitigation procedures by end of September. So what is the recommendation? Recommendation is we have robust CFS filtering, but we want to buy a tool called Content Keeper Mobile Resource, or CK Mobile, that will actually help us put the same filtering and same monitoring of student activity, online activity, in the home setting, off premises, as they would be doing it on premises in the school building. So I'm very excited about this. And it is in our board legislation for the coming up board meeting. So we have made the selection. And we want to make sure, right, student emails people aren't getting to our students through emails, because we turned down emails for all the 50,000 students in the spring. So students cannot send emails outside the district, and students cannot receive emails from outside the district unless there are known partners and we have vetted them. Like I Know I Can or AmeriCorps, they may reach out to the students for tutoring purposes. So we have a carefully vetted white list, if you will. Everybody else is on the blacklist. They cannot receive emails or send emails from outside the district. So previously I was talking to you about inappropriate content being sent. They're actually sent, they're going nowhere. They're being blocked by our filters. They're going nowhere. That's how we can tell you. And student logins are reset daily on the Chromebook. It's not even daily, it's actually hourly on the Chromebooks to provide an additional layer of security. So they default to a certain certain information of the student. We're also looking to add some additional special characters, because obviously because of the hacks that's happening, to provide an additional level of security. The other risk mitigation, right? We are constantly watching our internet traffic, and we are providing multiple levels of defense from attacks. We are increasing phishing scam awareness. We used to send them once yearly. Now we are quarterly sending the updates, as well as we are specifically including training in our 2 weeks of PD. Now we actually have a cool video. If you haven't had a chance to see, I can send you a link from our own Michelle Van Dyke. And then we are providing spam filtering, and we are continuously blacklisting spam on a daily basis. In case of an incident, if we do have an incident, which we most often find out from monitoring our traffic, we contact our insurance carriers, the law firm that handles it, and cyber forensics providers to understand and reduce risk. Immediately, we'll reduce the risk, we'll address the issue, then we'll take care of, the aftermath and what else was exposed and all those things. We continuously work with local, state, and federal agencies also to monitor our traffic, and they call us with information. For instance, right before we closed, FBI called us and said, hey, one of your servers, one of your IPs is sending bad traffic. Can you look at it? It seems like this patch wasn't applied. We had already applied the patch, and they called us a few weeks after, but we have those checks and balances in place too. And we are most of our district, to answer your specific question, Mr. Jordan, most of our district applications we use are hosted applications. So by patching our servers constantly and by patching our network equipment constantly, we have mitigated a huge risk for people using those applications. And on their desktops itself, right, both teachers, both staff and students, almost all applications they use are either tied to our G Suite or tied to our OS 365, both of which are set up for auto updates of patches, auto update of security vulnerabilities. So they are getting patched. There are specific firmware patches or something that we might send when they're on-prem. Those are things that we do. There is not a huge risk with them, but still to keep the performance up and running, those are the patches they're not receiving today when they're remote. However, even for those purposes, right, we're looking at a solution from Microsoft called Always On VPN Today we have a portal where people can conduct some of the business, and we have a Cisco VPN that they can log in. If people are logging in through Cisco VPN, they're getting all the patches, all the patches. But with the always on VPN that we're exploring, it's a Microsoft tool. It'll be very seamless, and they will get all 100% of the patches. Today, they're getting almost all of the patches, bearing a few, because those require them to be authenticated with our Active Directory and our network. And so they have to be on-prem. So if we do go back to work site in a limited fashion, then they will get those patches automatically when we do that, right? But meanwhile, we're also exploring other options, because you will realize this. We have made so many strides in this remote work that our remote learning, that it might very well become an extension of our daily life. Even say COVID is fully eradicated and we all go back to work site 100% of the time. In those instances, we want to make sure our students, our staff, they're all protected at all times. So we continue to explore options that will give us the ability to do it off-prem as well, give them the 100% patches.
And have we blocked the ability for teachers and students to upload software or other types of information off the internet or other sources?
We don't block that ability for the teachers per se, but the other patches that they have from Microsoft and Google will catch any bad actors if they need to. Every device has the antivirus too, which is not on the network, it's on the device. So if those things will happen, students cannot download things to their Chromebook. That's why we constantly reset their passwords, so that we provide them an additional layer of security, because they are our most vulnerable.
Okay, thank you.
I can take any other questions. Yes, Ms. Smith.
Sorry, I had to get off of mute. If we go with this always on VPN, will this eliminate the use of the light version of the portal, or will we still have to, is that still a more streamlined way to get access to our items that are on these on the servers?
It'll replace that as well as the Cisco VPN. It'll be one solution. That way it's more seamless to you than, because it'll authenticate with Active Directory, and you don't have to worry about when do I use what and all those different things.
And then a follow-up, if I may. I know just because of the way that we had to leave the district, almost at like a one-day notice back in March, we had decided to kind of not have the passwords automatically resetting after 90 days. What are we doing with that? Are we going back to, our 90-day automatic resets of passwords to Active Directory?
Ms. Smith, can I answer that question offline? Because a public meeting, I don't want to put a lot of that security posture
Perfect.
out there. I can answer that question offline if you don't mind.
No, that's perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, one more, Chair Ragland, if I may. Carolyn, does your team have on its plans to review the IT security as through an upcoming audit, given the new change in the environment?
That's one of the items that I wanted to discuss on our on our fourth agenda.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah, fourth agenda item.
Very good. And then lastly, Ms. Verney, has there been an outside help to perform an attack and penetration test on the district systems?
We conduct a penetration test on the district systems every year annually, Mr. Jordan.
An internal test or with an external party?
No, with an external entity, because that'll give us the most insight into our vulnerability. Yes, we always conduct it with the external entity.
Great. And then Carolyn, then I'll save my thought then until your topic, if you folks would be participating in the next attack and pen. Great, thank you.
Any further questions for Ms. Vierny? Hearing none. Thank you, ma'am, for a great detailed report. If there are further questions, I think we can refer them to Madam Auditor, who can get in touch with you and get them answered for us. So thank you very much for your work today.
Yeah, thank you for the update.
Thank you, Chair Ragland. And yeah, I will be glad to answer questions through Internal Auditor, Ms. Smith. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, next we have the wonderful Dr. Michelle Klein, who will be joining us and giving us a report with her team. Dr. Klein, it's good to have you.
Thank you, Audit Chair Ragland. I appreciate that. If someone will close out of their screen, I'm going to go ahead and start sharing.
Michelle, give me a minute. I'm trying to unshare this thing.
No problem.
Oh, there you go. You got it, Michelle. You got the floor.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that. So thank you so much, Audit Chair Ragland and members of the Audit and Accountability Committee, for giving my team an opportunity to provide a few updates this afternoon. I was asked by Internal Auditor Director, Mr. Kevin O'Connor, to give a few updates specifically with regard to our Education Management Information System, better known as EMIS, our Chromebook distribution and testing in light of the current pandemic. Assisting me today will be Ms. Rhonda Welch, our Director of Testing and Program Services, and Mr. Greg Wisniewski, Director of Information Management. I'm really pleased to report that our division of EMIS has not missed a beat during our work from home period. Each EMIS team member was outfitted with proper equipment to do their jobs from home. With WebEx, Zoom, Teams, and Confluence, they have persevered and met all deadlines and appeal windows for the Ohio Department of Education. Although we miss our face-to-face interactions with each other, we have continued the excellent on-time reporting that our EMIS team is known for within the Ohio Department of Education. All student, staff, and financial data reporting for the 2019-20 school year has been completed on time. This includes reporting of teacher licensure, federal child count, as well as things like reconciliation of our level 1 within district errors and level 2 errors between districts. As most of you know already, we are one of only 2 A sites in the state of Ohio, which basically means we report all of our own data to ODE directly without a third party intervening. The other district in the state of Ohio that does this is Akron City Schools. On September 2nd through September 9th, our students at Columbus City Schools who do not currently have a Chromebook will pick up their Chromebook at their school of attendance or homeschool for the CCS Digital Academy students. During this portion of the slide deck, I'm going to ask Mr. Greg Wisniewski to share everything from assigning a Chromebook to our labeling system and the tracking of the devices within the student information system that we have worked closely with our IT team to build a great system. This system was also checked by our internal auditor to verify that we have crossed all of our T's and dotted all of our I's. We want to ensure fiscal responsibility for these devices. Mr. Wisniewski?
Thank you, Dr. Klein. And if you would end your share, perfect, excellent. I will be sharing my screen here in just 1 second. Co-chairs, Board Member Ragland, Board Member Beckerly, Board President Dare, Board Member Dr. Pierce, Madam Moderator, thank you for this opportunity today. We're going to start today with sharing information regarding, and this is going to pivot off of some of the information that Ms. Vierny shared with us. And we're going to start with talking about those labeling process. And right now, what you're seeing on your screen, and I'm going to make it a little bit larger, is, and you might need to zoom on your own, but I'm going to make it a little bit larger. Right now, what you're seeing on your screen is what is called our Infinite Campus dashboard. And this is a wiki site of information regarding accountability in our student information system, Infinite Campus, that exists to contain all the custom information specific to Columbus City Schools. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down here on the left-hand side, and what I want to share is that we have a complete package of documentation associated with Chromebook distribution and tracking for the 2021 school year. And the first area that we're going to look at right here is that we're going to look at our new Chromebook labels that Ms. Vierny mentioned. So during the last school year, at the end of the school year, we obviously had an emergency situation where we had to very quickly get Chromebooks out into the hands of students. Recognizing that we did not have a labeling system that had a necessarily unique ID across all the schools, we put a system into place in Infinite Campus in order to record the distribution of Chromebooks, in which we combined fields, both the distribution site field as well as the unique identifier that was indicated on the Chromebook in order to create a unique ID. This year, we've purchased approximately 35,000 unique identifier tags, and we purchased tags that we felt would add to the efficiency of the process. We purchased a two-part tag that has a code 128 barcode along with a unique identifier and 3 tear-offs associated for that same identifier. The main tag is going to be placed directly onto the Chromebook device itself, directly above the serial tag service tag number of the Chromebook, and we can see that there. Since these Chromebooks are most likely going to be distributed in their boxes as they were delivered from our partners in information technology, we will take one of the tear-off tags and place it directly on the box label right above the service tag number. And that design is to increase an efficiency of distribution so that we have a single point to view both numbers that are going to be recorded and associated with the student without having to open the box. The additional tear-offs would be available to put either on the charger brick so that we can match charging bricks to devices. So when families at home are having that conversation when they have more than one student and we know that they're all working at the same time and a student A says, I can't find my charger, and student B says, no, you have my charger, they can quickly look at the Chromebook that they have and the number and match them up and in that conversation right there. So these are our new labels that we're going to be utilizing this year. We have 35,000 labels. This will cover the 20,000 new devices bought, as well as all the remaining devices that are in the school buildings, but not yet distributed at the conclusion of the last school year. Now I want to pivot and display the process for recording the Chromebooks in Infinite Campus. And before I pivot to that screen, I do want to make sure and make a statement that we're going to be looking at our production environment in Infinite Campus, but no worries, we are looking at a school that is called our Infinite Campus Technical Institute. It is a state excluded school, and all the student data is all fictional data matched with characters. This is not student information. Any of the information that you see in here cannot be tied back to any of our students or families in the district. So I'm going to pop over to Infinite Campus, and I've pulled up our school here, and I've pulled my example student. So I'm going to make this a little bit larger. We have our student here. This is a 12th grade student. And in order to record a Chromebook distribution, we're going to use what's called a custom form in Infinite Campus. So as you can see right here, there's a Forms tab. When we click on that Forms tab, we have right down at the bottom a button that says New, and we're going to create a new distribution form. So I'm going to go ahead and hit New. And because I know that form's at the bottom, I'm going to sort, and I'm going to see that I have a 2021 Chromebook distribution parent guardian request. What you're going to see here as this loads is it's asking me to indicate the guardian who's picking up the device. So it'll actually reference back to the student information system, look for individuals that are marked as guardians, and I'm going to pick the individual that's picking up the device. I'm going to match the name on that guardian as well, because that's going to populate information into the form. The important part about this form is, as you can see, as I scroll up, is that we want to pre-populate as much information in order to make the distribution process as quick and seamless as possible. So you can see at the top, we have a header that has the student number, the name, and the grade, and that's simply there in case we ever need to have paper documentation to provide a quick access point for filing and checking if we have to pull paper documentation. You can see here that in this document, this outlines the agreement and the acceptable use policies associated with the Chromebook device. It talks about the saving documents, the software on Chromebooks, protecting the Chromebook by following these rules. And then we scroll down to the bottom and we see right here, as we talked about those fines for replacements, we actually do have a breakdown of Chromebook replacement, of total replacement, a Chromebook screen replacement, a keyboard replacement, or a charger replacement. So there's, and we'll talk about just a second, a fine within Infinite Campus that is a variable rate fine that allows the user that's assessing that fine to select the value associated with that fine based off the information. Now, these paper documents will be available for families to take with them, but are not required to be signed. And we handle that in two ways. The first way is that I have a field that's a required field right here that says that the parent guardian indicated verbally that they acknowledge and understand the obligations outlined in the above document. So when I'm giving this device, I'm going to make sure and ask the parent, I'm going to make sure that they have the paper, understand the obligations and requirements, ask them if they agree. And as long as they agree, we can proceed with giving out the device. And we're going to go ahead and very quickly check that. As you can see, the pertinent information, the student information, the number, the name, if it's a high school student, what cohort they belong to, tying back to the household ID, the school, the guardian who's picking it up, and the guardian status, the disbursement date, the school again that they're from. And then we see these two red fields here. This is the unique identifier field and the serial tag number. So in this particular case, we would just make sure that we record the number that is associated with that device. And then we're going to go ahead and hit save. Now, before I hit save real quick, I do want to point out that if we are distributing a device at an alternate site other than the school that the student's enrolled, we have a very quick drop-down menu here that we can pick that device that it's being distributed from. So once I hit save, I now have my saved document, and I see that I have a field right here that says requesting e-signature. So I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And I'm going to go ahead and review participants. And I can see that I have a parent right here that has, said they've agreed verbally, but they have yet to sign the document. All I have to do is hit request signature and request signature. We've now sent that form out to the parent to access through their parent portal to sign that form. So very quickly, I'm going to pop over and I'm going to log in as that parent so you can see on the parent side how easy it is to sign a form. All right, so I am now logged in as the parent of the student who we just distributed a device to. When you log in, we see that we have a message center and some announcements. And right on the left-hand side, we have the Today button. And that Today button lets us go ahead and see everything that's pertinent that's waiting for me out there today with respect to my student. So I'm going to click Today, and I see here's my student. This particular time, he doesn't have any assignments due today or tomorrow. The student doesn't owe any fees. And now I see this new field down at the bottom that says Documents Need Attention. All I have to do is click on that document. It's going to load the document for the parent again to review. And the information that we just recorded is now in there. And we see right at the bottom, it attaches a signature page with a large icon that says click here to sign. And as the parent, if I click there, it tells me again, if we sign to agree or decline to disagree, you can change your signature choice until you submit the document. So I'm going to go ahead and hit sign. And once I have it signed, I'm going to hit submit. As a parent, now I'm completely done with that particular process. Let me log back out real quick and log back into our production environment. I'm going to go ahead and search that student again. There's one last step in order to complete the process. And this does not have to be done, right at the same time. This is following up, but we just go back to the forms. We now see that there's a form that is requiring action on our part as a school district. So we're going to click that. And we can see right here that we can review the participants. We can see that that form was signed and the time that it was signed, and we can hit complete. Now, I'm not going to hit, actually, I will hit complete. I apologize. I'm going to close this and hit complete so you can see that. You'll now see that as soon as that form is completed, it becomes locked. All right. So That's essentially the parent process for submitting the form and the district process for completing the form. There's two parts that I want to touch with real quick, and I'm going to jump back over to our instructions. And one of those parts has to do with the contact log. Associated with the custom form, there is actually a contact log that is attached. So if I go ahead and hit review participants, I can see right here that I have a contact log entry. This allows a user in Columbus City Schools to record information and communications that Columbus City Schools had with that in the parent guardian directly attached to the form, so it stays attached to the form for the entire time. So I just select the individual that it was. In this particular case, we'll say it's happening right now, and I choose the contact type. So maybe this time I had an email to the individual. It allows me to write a description. And once I go ahead, I can save a contact log, and you'll see if I scroll up, I now have a running history of the contact log. So that's definitely an excellent feature for recording information and communications specific to these particular forms and this particular device. The last thing I want to show real quick associated with this is to go ahead, and I'm going to open up this example. This is a different form, but we're going to handle it the same way. I'm going to go ahead and review my participants, request my e-signatures. I'm going to open it back up again, and I'm going to hit review participants. In this particular case, what if I had a communication with the parent, and the parent, it's just not feasible for them to electronically sign, but I've had that communication with them. You know, we have families that are in transition, families that are experiencing different challenges that we don't know. We want to make sure that we have a process in place to still complete the process. So simply, in order to override the parent e-signature, all I have to do is click the individual, and then I come in here and I can say, spoke with family regarding inability, and this is going to be, whoa, my texting is off, my typing, I apologize. Spoke with family regarding form. Currently out of country, agreed to, and as you can see, it does have autocorrect as long as you're using the modern browsers, thank you, to responsibilities. And in this example, once I'm here, all I have to do is hit save override, and now I've overridden that particular signature. We can see that it's right there. It says that it's overridden, what time it was, the time with it. And then we go ahead and hit close and complete. And again, this form is now locked from that process. No changes can be made to that form. Lastly, I want to talk real quick about some distribution reports. So if we come back to the area here, we've covered both the override and the e-signature, and we do have a set of reports available. And these reports are built and tied to the information that's stored in the custom table within Infinite Campus. We have distribution reports that look at how Chromebooks are distributed by families and calculate distribution by household ID. We have a check-in process that allows for an individual that has a Chromebook that's in their hand that has a unique ID on it, but they don't know who it belongs to go ahead and select that unique ID and plug that directly into the system, and it'll tell them what student it is associated with, or if it is not associated with a student and can be checked out. We also have a student status report that is a 3-option report that allows you to run either for all students, or it'll display students that have devices checked out who are enrolled in your school building, or students that have devices do not have devices checked out and need a device but are enrolled in your school building. And lastly, we have a damaged, lost, or stolen Chromebooks report that goes through and looks at the return condition of devices when devices are returned, and indicates if it was returned with a specific damage condition or if it was indicated lost or stolen. That is very quick through those areas. And I know I spoke quick and there was a lot of information, so I apologize. But at this point, I'd like to go ahead and stop sharing and allow Ms. Rhonda Welch to continue on with the accountability presentation.
Dr. Klein, are you going to share your screen?
Thank you so much, Mr. Wisniewski, for that detailed presentation on the labels. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Same here. It was really impressive.
Okay. Dr. Klein, you're on mute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me try to go back. Okay, so I want to let you know that Greg has been working in his team in collaboration with our IT department, with our treasurer's office, with academic services, and with our internal auditor. So I really appreciate all the detailed explanation and the focus on the accountability to be fiscally responsible, because these devices aren't cheap. They don't qualify for an asset tag. They're not worth that much, but we certainly want to be fiscally responsible. So Greg and all of the teams that have helped him, thank you so much. The next item I was asked to speak on is testing, and something that's near and dear to my heart and has been on the minds of many high school students and teachers throughout this pandemic, and that is the ACT test. Many ACT testing sites were closed down due to the COVID-19, or spots were reduced. Many of our students were closed out. The closest site available in Ohio was Cleveland, Ohio for the fall administration. A high ACT composite score can open doors for our students. So what happened? Our counselors came to the rescue in working with our assessment department. Our counselors stepped up and will be giving a Columbus City School only ACT administration on October 10th at 4 different locations within Columbus City Schools. 1 location in each of our quadrants of the city for our student convenience. Our custodial team has already gotten all the student desks and chairs ready. They're more than 6 feet apart, and we will provide masks for all students and staff who do not bring their own. And we will have on hand sanitizer for all who enter the buildings. All of the assessment team, as well as the school counselors, will be volunteering their time. This is a Saturday and is not a paid job. The high level risk here is not giving our students the ability to take their ACT test, which could result in a loss of national merit status and scholarship dollars for many of our students. So we are very excited that West High School, Columbus Downtown High School, Northland High School, and Walnut Ridge will be our sites. And next, we have Ms. Welch to share some additional testing information. Rhonda?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with you some information regarding our 2020-2021 assessment calendars and information. Please know our assessments will be taken this year with the same testing deadlines established by Ohio Department of Education. As of today, there has not been any changes communicated. I would like to first highlight the Kindergarten Readiness Assessment Revised. This particular assessment is, of course, for our kindergartners. This is a test that's in statute in which ODE does not have the ability to change or revise in any capacity. This is a face-to-face assessment that must be administered in its entirety by November 1st. It consists of 4 domains: language and literacy, social foundations, math, and physical wellness. We use the language and literacy domain as the beginning of year diagnostic for our kindergarten students. The language and literacy domain is used to determine if they will qualify for a reading improvement monitoring plan. Therefore, it must be completed by September 30th. The 3 remaining domains must be completed by November 1st. The KRA can't be transmitted virtually, and it must be secured at school. Therefore, due to our current remote status, we have requested for schools to schedule individual appointments for their kindergarten students and a parent during the week of September 21st through 25th. The assessment has been revised to consist of now 27 questions. We have allowed kindergarten instructional assistants to be trained as additional support with administering this assessment this year. We will follow all safety and health protocols set forth by Columbus Public Health and our health services team. iReady. This year, our new diagnostic is iReady. Previously, it was in place for grades K to 3, and it expanded to grades 4 and 5. However, beginning this year, it will be our kindergarten through 8th grade diagnostic. Beginning September 8th through the 30th, we will administer our reading diagnostic. How will we complete our diagnostic by September 30th while working remotely? It has been decided that we will take our initial diagnostic remotely. It is not a decision that we have taken lightly, but after much consideration, we have decided that it is the safest way to complete the process. This information is critical to help guide our instruction to serve our students. This is a different way of doing things for our Department of Accountability. We will follow the iReady Family Proctor Plan 2A. This plan consists of assigning a specific date and time for when students will take their diagnostic between September 8th and 30th. Schools will be requested to provide me their testing calendar, their testing schedule by Friday, September 4th. The teacher in this process will monitor the test progression and completion in real time via the Diagnostic Status Class Report. Families will be supported with this process by receiving letters that will be sent home to inform them of this important assessment, detailing their roles and responsibilities during the process. Each will receive a specific date and time that their child will test. iReady has provided Spanish and French versions of this letter, but I've also reached out to the ESL department to obtain the letter to be translated in other languages to support our families. iReady has given us a plethora of resources to support schools and families with this process. Our leadership, I have emphasized when speaking with the principals last week, our leadership is vital to ensure the success of this assessment. OST and end of course. The OST will take place this year. This assessment for students in grades 3 to 8 in the content area of ELA, math, science for grades 5 and 8, in high schools, ELA, math, algebra 1, and geometry, American history, government, and biology. ODE also has created a new resource this year to assist us with preparing for our assessment. Grade 3 will take their ELA assessment for fall right now, the weeks of October 23rd through the 30th. ODE has also given us tools for us to be able to utilize and help to support preparing not only for helping our students in general, but for preparing for our spring assessment, which will take place March 22nd through the 18th. The new tool is called the ODE Benchmark Test and Checkpoint Assessments for every OST grade and subject. The Benchmark Assessment Test was released August 17th. It can be given twice a year. The benchmark tests are available for every testing area that has an OST assessed grade, like grades 3 to 8. For each subject that they have an OST, there's a benchmark test for it. We have decided that we will participate in utilizing the benchmark test. Benchmark assessment 1 will take place November 2nd through the 25th, November 2nd through the 20th. And benchmark test 2 will take place January 25th through February 5th. This particular assessment is a wonderful tool that it gives immediate feedback. When I take the assessment to the teacher, to the student, it will let the student know if they're identifying as a limited student, a basic student, if they're an advanced student, if they're, it helps to give the information of where they are. You are able to click on the exact test question to see how the question was formatted, just to see how well a student can perform. And again, it helps a teacher to adjust his or her instruction. The other resource is called the Checkpoint Task. It is going to be released August 31st. The initial information that I do know, it's in the standards align, and it has 5 to 7 tasks within each checkpoint. I will provide guidance to the schools how to utilize the checkpoint task, kind of helping. I don't want schools to be overwhelmed, but we do believe that there's some helpful information that schools could benefit from. So once we get access to see it on the 31st, we'll have more insight regarding that. Next, I'd like to talk about Naglieri and COGAT. These are additional tests that we will participate in February. Typically, the tests for Naglieri and COGAT have been in November, but this is an inter-district test that we have the flexibility to assign a time frame for. And with us taking the benchmark test around that time, we decided to move the Naglieri and COGAT to February. And plus, it's an assessment that cannot be virtual. It has to be a face-to-face assessment. So grade 2 takes the Naglieri, and COGAT takes, grade 5 takes the COGAT. OELPA. OELPA is a test that is given in our district from kindergarten through 12th grade. It's going to take place February 1st through 26th. However, we have something called the OELP screener. The OELP screener currently it's a face-to-face, in-person type of administration. However, due to us currently being remote, we must remain obligated to identify and serve our English learners during periods of remote learning. Therefore, during the family's virtual appointments with a central enrollment staff member, they are given a home language survey. ODE has granted this provisional. This survey confirms that this child speaks another language in their home. It consists of 8 questions. The information obtained from this survey allows us to flag a student in IC to indicate that the OELP screener needs to be administered when we return face-to-face, and is safe to do so. The OELP screener has to be administered within the first 30 days. The ELSL department will also make phone calls to parents to reassure them that their child is being serviced currently and will have a follow-up screener when we return with face-to-face instruction.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. I hope that this provides our Audit and Accountability Committee with a brief EMIS, Chromebook, and testing update. And all 3 of us are very available for any questions that you might have, please.
Is there any chance that
No,
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
sorry, Board Member Beckerly, please proceed.
is there any chance that the state might waive some of these state tests?
So we are really hoping so. Thank you for the question, Board Member Beckerly. The legislators come back September 15th, and the real reason we put the KRAR off until September 21st is so that if they make a decision, we can actually cancel those and not have to have those. But at the current time, as James Barnes, our legal counsel, and Eric Roush, our policy review person, has advised us that we are under state statute to complete the KRAR in a face-to-face manner, because ODE has come out and given specific guidance that we cannot do the KRAR in its totality unless we do it face-to-face. So that is the reason that we kind of held off and pushed our KRARs until the very last minute, September 21st through the 25th. As you remember, Rhonda indicated that we have to have the language and literacy portion done by September 30th. So we are really trying to work with that and hopeful. As far as the other testing goes, keep in mind that the Naglieri and COGAT are required by law for us to give. We do the most minimum amount of testing possible because we feel that progress monitoring by our teachers is much more effective than those assessments that are given. And we take all of that information together to formulate what's best for a student. We would never want to use one data point to make a decision on a student moving forward in a grade level.
Yeah, okay, so it seems to me that once they're back in session, there might be a window there to do some lobbying.
I'm hoping so.
Okay, so
Dr.
let's,
Roush is on it, I'm on it, and James Barnes also joined us.
can I be part of that too? Because I think that, elected to electeds, it's more effective.
I will make sure I text Dr. Roush. You're volunteering right this second. Thank you.
Right, because I want to, I think that this testing in this time frame is beyond absurd. And we should probably figure out how to convey that sentiment as effectively as possible.
Yes. The one thing they have already waived is the retention of third graders. So that is actually a good thing, but I think it
Not
needs to go
enough.
further.
Yeah.
And the other thing that is really not enough, ma'am, if I may say, is the OST third grade. We're supposed to take the last week in October before we're actually even back, and that would not be a good thing.
Okay, the next thing, because that's my next thing. It occurs to me that while I'm glad we're not trying to do the OST face-to-face, that the extension of grace there has to be far and wide. Because I'm just imagining all the different scenarios in terms of kids' houses and having the parents structure that and set it up. You know, you're gonna have some parents that aren't paying attention at all. You're gonna have some parents that are uber stressed about it and driving you crazy. You're gonna have I mean, you can't even imagine all the scenarios you're gonna have about that.
Yes, ma'am. The other thing we have to keep in mind is currently the Ohio Department of Education requires us to use our formative assessment, which now is iReady, for
Right.
qualification of gifted. And I cannot, in good conscience, tell you that that is a good idea because that is a test being given at home. So if, let's say, a brother or sister or a mom or a dad, you know, happen to be helping, their
Right.
child could be misidentifying a student, and that label remains with them for the rest of their life. I know that both NWA MAP and iReady have come out with white papers and have told the Ohio Department of Education they want to drop the gifted identification for this year since so many districts are doing this remotely, but we have not had ODE act upon that as of yet. Maybe that's something else you might want to advocate for.
Yeah, for sure. We can do that with ODE over the summer. We don't have to wait for the legislators to be back.
Right, exactly.
And then, but I think even just in terms of, and I think that we should really consider communicating to the teachers and the principals and everybody now that, you know, we're doing this because the state's requiring us to.
Yeah.
But, you know, to take the pressure off to the greatest extent we can internally, because I've seen way too many teachers and way too many principals, I guess, for that matter, but certainly teachers themselves do it to themselves. They hold themselves accountable for how well their kids do, you know, and they, you know, and they hold each other accountable. Like, you know, they whisper in the hall, oh, this one's kids didn't pass this year and that kind of thing. Like, so anything we can do as leaders from, you know, the board on down to, you know, to say, we are not as an organization counting this in any way. Like, you know, I mean, we might not say that, but, you know, something to telegraph that this is a grace period. This is, you know, we've been talking about grace. This is where we need to extend it laterally, hierarchically.
Right.
In every direction. And I think that I'd be happy to be part of that process too, even if it's as much as, you know, recording videos that go to everybody in a staff meeting that says, look, we know this is kind of crazy. And, you know, and I'm not beyond saying that, like, and let them know that the board knows.
Right.
You know, I mean, I think that we can't solve it and acknowledge that we can't solve it, but we sure as heck aren't going to pay much attention to it either.
Thank you, Board Member Beckerly. I do want you to know that we have filed formal tickets as well as emails with the Ohio Department of Education voicing our concern and our thought process being the largest district and the best district in the state of Ohio. So we are pursuing that. So thank you.
All right, let's keep pushing. Sorry, audit people. I
No
wandered a little
worries.
off the audit.
No, all of those things are relevant, Ms. Becker.
Okay,
all
thanks.
those things are relevant. I do want to balance a bit of what was said by making sure that we are paying close attention to not minimize the need for excellence in this environment, though. We just can't throw up our hands and say, well, it's impossible to do, and so we're not going to worry about it. That cannot be the case because we have far too many students that will fall victim to a culture that would just, you know, look at that as a negative outcome for young people. And I just want to make sure that as we do have those very, very good discussions around what all of this means that we are hammering home to our building leaders and to our teachers that our expectation is that we teach to excellence in this environment in spite of the difficulties. You know, that has to be at the forefront of our thinking. And I know that the board has articulated that. I know that Dr. Dixon and you as well, Dr. Klein, have articulated that, but that also has to be a huge part of that discussion. My question, and it's really a comment based on a conversation that myself and board member Beckerly had with some of our community partners earlier this week. We talked about translation in our communication plan and how we're working with students and families of our ELL students. And we had Spanish and French that was already completed, and we're working towards making sure some of those other languages that we have within the district are getting their translation services out. We were speaking with a group of stakeholders this week around that particular process. And one thing that I would encourage you to do, Dr. Klein, as you move forward with not just this, but every aspect of accountability that you are presenting back to the public and presenting to our communications team, let's have all of our translators around the table at the same time. One of the things our partners mentioned to us was that they would appreciate getting real-time translated information from the district. So just as soon as we give out translation or translated information in Spanish or in French, we're giving it out in Nepali, we're giving it out in Somali. In those populations of our students that may not be French speaking or Spanish speaking aren't waiting until later dates to get information that is received. That is an equity issue. And myself and board member Beckerly heard them very loud and clear when they articulated that to us. And we mentioned that process here today as a part of what we feel that we need to do to communicate. But if we can start incorporating some of those other translators around the table with us as we go through this process so that we're presenting all of the information at the same time, that would be very helpful for us. Other questions?
Thank you so much for the suggestion. I appreciate that. I just want to add that we actually discussed that in cabinet today. So that's something that we are under Dr. Dixon's direction. We're working very strongly to do, and that it's going to be a focus of our engagement team. So Alicia is on it.
Yes, ma'am. So other questions from the committee for Dr. Klein and her team?
I have one more, and again, this might be wandering off the audit range, but what plan for that?
Board member Beckerly, I believe you broke up mid-sentence.
Oh.
If you could restate your question, please.
Don't show up at the appointed times to pick up the Chromebooks.
So that's a great question. Thank you, Board Member Beckerly. We are going to have them available for students. If their parents do not come with them, we are not going to withhold them because it is actually just like a textbook. It's a tool for them to learn, and we'll deal with it later. So we are going to hand them out to any student, any parent that comes. We have the great process in place to be able to verify who has what and who has already received one. So that won't be a problem.
Yeah, that process is incredible, just incredible. But I misspoke then. It sounded to me, my point was, it sounded to me like we're making them available for pickup. And it seems to me some students and some families aren't going to come either because they don't get the message because they're not paying attention or they don't have the ability to get there. Is there any plan?
To ask that. Guess what we're going to do? Maurice Oldham's team, we're actually going to devise routes, and we're actually going to have people deliver them.
Yes, that's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Thank you.
I was going to add, we'll add additional days too, apart from the
Sure, right.
We'll give them every opportunity to have access to a device.
Right, because you know how that grapevine works too. Like a kid in your neighborhood shows up with the Chromebook, and then all of a sudden the rest of the parents are saying, wait a minute, we got to get them too. And then that extra day will matter.
And then remember, it always has to be ongoing because there are always new students that are enrolling in our district.
Yes, yes. Terrific. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how thrilled I am with the detail and the thoroughness across the board.
Dr. Klein, if I may add to Board Member Beckerly's question too as well, given the system that's in place, since we do have those alternative options about getting them out, if we know the parent in advance, because we'd obviously be setting that up, we could actually have them sign even in advance before they receive their device. So then that becomes a little more proactive, which is even greater risk management.
Sure. Terrific.
Thank you.
Quick question in regards to kind of offside of the Chromebooks, but I noticed when you're going through, Greg, on the forms, there was a hotspot on there. How do you assess the availability of Wi-Fi at the student level, and how are you dealing with if they need to have hotspots so you know where to get on to the system?
I can answer that, Mr. Grant. We carefully collected data from our digital academy students on how many needed them. And so we exactly know how many of them needed, and we are distributing it. Outside of the digital academy, where a majority of our students are enrolled in remote learning, we are actually getting those requests from the principals of the building. They know their families well. And we currently, whatever demand we have, we are able to meet. On top of that, we are also addressing our homeless students and vulnerable youth, our Project Connect Youth, and we are actually making arrangements to procure an additional 1,500 or so hotspots and distribute them to the shelters. So they'll be available for, as students come homeless, they can have access to those there as well, so that their learning doesn't interrupt and can continue.
That's great. All right. Thank you.
Further questions for Dr. Klein and her team? Seeing none, Dr. Klein, thank you so much for your outstanding presentation today. And as to you again, Ms. Verney, thank you
Yes.
both for everything that you all have presented. This has been outstanding information for us today, and I really appreciate the professionalism with which you all have delivered these reports and the detailed information. So thank you so much. Madam Auditor, I'm going to turn it back over to you for the conclusion of part 2.
Okay, thank you, Chair Ragland. The final item under the part 2 is the technology risk identification and analysis discussion. And I put this on here basically so the committee can provide their experience and provide feedback on different ways that internal audit can be of service to our IT department and the district overall. Just a little historical perspective. Historically, the Office of Internal Audit does not have a dedicated IT auditor, someone that either has the credentials or the experience to actually manage that segment the way that we have other personnel in our department assigned to various segments. You know, we have someone assigned to the treasurer's office and to budget office. We have someone assigned to academics and accountability in order to cover the IT area, which, as you all have heard, is definitely a growing area, and an area that's just going to be intertwined in how we do business, even once COVID, you know, once there was a vaccine or a vaccination with COVID. I sincerely doubt if we go back to business as usual, because once you get these technology and the devices and the reality that, you know, we don't always have to drop everything and drive 20 minutes to attend a meeting or something like that, I sincerely doubt if we're going to be going back to business as usual. And with the, you know, deployment of all the various devices, I don't know if the way that we have been covering this area is sufficient for the times that we are in now. In the past, we have outsourced IT engagements. So we have worked with a CPA firm to come in and do, you know, like the IT risk assessment, whereas for all the rest of the district, we do the risk assessment, and we work very closely with the district personnel. For the IT area, we have outsourced various areas to be audited. And those audits have resulted in a lot of areas for improvement. And prior to our superintendent's decision to hire a CIO, the staff was just really stressed doing everything that we were asking of them as a growing district and as, a demanding, need for their services. And they did the best that they could, but there are just a lot of areas that have not been closed. So with that said, I want to look at some other ways to cover this area. And, there's always, we can continue to outsource the area, or we could look at bringing sources in-house, or I'm also open to, what other suggestions there are, but, it as you can see, it's intertwined in everything that we do. And it is an area that I believe deserves the attention from my staff that other areas in the district receive. So that was item number 4. And with that,
Madam Auditor, if you don't mind, I'm being mindful of our time here today, and I understand we're at 10 minutes after 5. Stop here for 5:30. If I could ask the committee to submit their ideas to Madam Auditor around this particular issue through email, so that we can have a catalog about them, and then we can bring this to head at our next meeting in September, where we can have a conversation about this based on some of the ideas that would be submitted to you, Madam Auditor. That way we can get to item number 3, which is our Office of Internal Audit report, and then as well as the Puccio report, which is item number 4. I know we only have about 20 minutes remaining, and I think in this case, if we could submit those ideas online through email, I think that would serve our purpose, and then we'll put this as an agenda item for next month, if that is okay, Madam Auditor.
that works fine with me.
Madam Co-Chair, what is your thought about that?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, thank you both for allowing for that. I just want to make sure that we get the reports done before we get to our time limit. So hearing that, if we can go to section 3, Office of Internal Audit report, and start with the fraud, waste, and abuse reporting system for fiscal year 2020. Auditor, the floor is yours.
We have Kevin Sankowski and John Dean, who are going to be going over that report, which will be followed by the internal audit activity and dashboard report, and then we will close it out with the Puccio report. And I do believe we can get all of these completed in the time that we have allocated. So I will turn it over to Mr. Sankowski.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will be short and concise. As you're aware, OIA is responsible for managing the district's fraud, waste, and abuse anonymous reporting system. And annually, we have provided the fiscal year end reporting of the incidents of fraud, waste, and abuse that are reported via our system. This is now the 3rd year that we've provided this information in this format. The format that you have in front of you is similar in most respects to what we've done in the past 2 years. There is one noted exception, which I will get to as we talk a little bit more about the content of it, as well as then lead you into Mr. Dean and, and his information. I don't intend to go over any of the actual specifics of these statistics, since they're there, and certainly open for questions, but there are a couple of things I want to make sure that I point out from a content standpoint, just in case those questions came up and they, some of these things popped a little bit and maybe has some questions. So I want to make sure I get ahead of these in case they are on your radar, but I'll also answer other questions. Well, the first item is if you note, in 2020, we have an increase of looks like a significant increase in reports, from 37 to 55 reports. It's important to note that increase, a large portion of that increase, 13 of the 18 reports that are related to that are actually attributed to a single reporter. We had a reporter who filed multiple reports regarding the same general concerns. And so while that looks like a big number, it actually is not. It really is only a small or a slight increase. In the departments area,
Kevin, if I may, why did they keep filing the reports? Typically that may mean that there was not resolution, or they felt there wasn't resolution.
They didn't feel there was resolution. There were a number of things that the employee has been dealing with over historically here in the district, some personnel related items. They don't feel that they were addressed to their satisfaction. So continue to report to us via this mechanism.
Okay.
In the departments area, and actually the departments area is a new area for this. It's the only new area that we have here on the report. But in the departments area, you're going to see that there looks like a large number for transformation and leadership department. And I only want to make note or to remind folks is that transformation and leadership makes up basically all of the school buildings that we have within the district. And so it's not perhaps totally unusual that a predominant number of reports might come out of that area. And so I just wanted to make sure folks understood that since that is the largest portion or the largest section within the organization, that number not necessarily in and of itself is indicative of an issue within the transformation and transformation and leadership area. And then thirdly, the nature of the reports, you'll see that we have misconduct and inappropriate behavior and unethical conduct behavior. If you were to compare those to last year, those two would look like
one in my car.
Those two might look like significant increases. However, really where those are more likely or more attributed to is that in November, we had switched platforms for our reporting system. In the configuration of that new platform, it allowed us to be a little more precise and a little more accurate in how we were categorizing the nature of the reports. And so that, I think that led to a lot of the identifications or the increase in these numbers that were related to these two areas to make them look a little more significant. So it was that configuration allowed us to do that. I mentioned that one of the areas that changed is departments, and we swapped out a section that used to be in here. It was I think titled Outcomes by Employee Relations, and what that was is that was a section where we would identify the items that were referred to employee relations for their review, and then whatever the outcomes of those were. What we did is we wanted to put the departments in here rather than those outcomes so that we can maybe give a little more idea of where the incident reports are taking place within the organization from a department standpoint, and thought that that information might be a little more valuable for us to present here for this conversation or for this discussion rather than the actual outcomes. Now I say all that, and I'm happy to entertain any questions about the information on here. But one of the things we did is that in conjunction with this presentation, we asked John Dean from the Director of Labor Management and Employee Relations to actually come and answer any questions that you might have about those items that are referred to employee relations. Because inevitably there is a question that comes up as to what is the disposition of those items. So John is going to be available to answer those specific questions you might have. But we also wanted to give John an opportunity to talk a little bit about his department, to give you folks some greater exposure into this process and what happens to things that come into the office and then maybe get referred someplace else. So I'll answer any questions that anyone has about the specific information, or if there are none, we'll turn it over to John to pick up.
Kevin, real quick, if I may, the anonymous and the anonymous yes and no, what was the makeup of that last year, percentage-wise? Is it similar, or did it change?
I have that right here. Last year we had 12 were yes and 25 were no. So it's a similar proportion.
25 were yes, and
I'm sorry, 25 were yes, 12 were no.
so it looks like the yeses went up a little bit more this year.
Yes. And
Yeah.
remember that those would include whether or not any of those 13 reports
Sure.
were originally identified as anonymous.
Okay.
Because even though I was able to eventually put them all together as one of the reporters or as a single reporter, as they were reported, not all of them were reported as identified individual. Some of them were, some of them were not.
And were any of the allegations or the system anything to do with sexual molestation or physical abuse of students?
No, not any of
not
those
through this mechanism.
No,
Okay.
I mean we've had some where folks have made perhaps sexual harassment or hostile workplace type of
Right.
things, but not of those two specific things that you mentioned.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions from the committee on this topic? Okay, hearing none, please proceed.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Dean then, and allow him to give you a little thumbnail about his organization or his portion of the organization.
All right. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this meeting today. It is my pleasure to be here and to present a little bit about employee relations. My name is John Dean, and for the last year, it's been quite a year, I've been the Director of Employee Relations for Columbus City Schools, and I'm going to give you a high-level overview of our investigative process, just so you can understand the methodology and the analysis that we undertake when we receive an allegation of employee misconduct. And employee misconduct is a very broad term. Quite simply stated, though, it is an investigation that takes place when an employee has failed to meet an expectation. So it always starts with an allegation that an employee did not follow this policy, did not follow this procedure, did not follow this supervisory directive. One mechanism of intake for these cases is through OIA. Kevin every so often graces us with a gift by way of a form or an anonymous complaint, and then we get to take a look at it quickly. Our first analysis is, if what is alleged true, would there be an administrative outcome? Okay, so if they allege something, so-and-so employee was 3 minutes late to work on one occasion, we're not going to entertain discipline, even if that is 100% accurate. That is something that we would decline to open a case and refer it to the appropriate administrator just to handle. But assuming that we get an allegation that would result in disciplinary action, if it's true, we would sign it to an investigator. My office has 4 part-time investigators. Each of those folks works 2 or 3 days a week. Every single one of mine are retired law enforcement, so there's quite a bit of experience within the office. I understand from a normal year, at any given time, we have about 12 to 15 cases open and active. This year, it was between 35 and 40. I have found that to be consistent in my career, that when we have a new leader in place, we have Dr. Dixon, who is relatively new, there's a new set of expectations being imposed, and that leads to an uptick in these types of investigations in these matters. And that was true here. So if we assign a case to an investigator, that investigator gathers documents, physical evidence, witness statements and interviews, and then ultimately an interview with the employee against whom the allegation is made. So the employee suspected of wrongdoing. That person, because we are in a collective bargaining environment, may very well have a right to a union representative. So we work through those logistics as well. Make sure that if it's a teacher or other certificated employee, that there's a CEA representative. If it's one of our classified staff, we've got an appropriate OPSI representative in place for that interview. The investigator then takes a review of all of the evidence that they've gathered as a part of the investigation, and then reduces that to a report of investigation. And that is ultimately then what closes out our role as far as the investigation. They will reach a conclusion that is one of 2 things, whether the allegation is founded or it is unfounded. If the allegation is founded, it will kick over into the disciplinary process, quite likely. And if it is unfounded, it gets closed out, and we notify, if known, the person making the allegation, and we send a letter as well to the employee suspected of misconduct, letting them know that it has been closed out with no further action. We have a locked storage closet in employee relations, and that's where we store all of the closed files. So as I said, it was quite a busy year that ended abruptly in mid-March. So as we are bringing folks back to work at this point, we are re-engaging our investigation and our pre-disciplinary process. So from a high level, that's the process. Happy to address any questions that anyone may have.
Questions for Mr. Dean? Thank you very much, Mr. Dean. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Madam Auditor, the floor is yours.
Okay, I don't have a question, but I also just want to thank Mr. Dean for his cooperation with our office. You know, we do work hand in hand, and we appreciate the prompt response and getting back to us whenever we refer something to their way. So thank you.
Thank you.
That concludes, no, that doesn't conclude the internal auditor's report. I'm sorry about that. I was jumping the gun. Chair Ragland, if it's fine with you, I would like to propose that we do not do the internal audit dashboard report. I sent a copy out to the committee ahead of time. There's nothing new. It's just a typical update as far as where we stand on the work plan and how we did as far as CPE. I would like to spend these last few minutes having the committee hear of the update on the Puccio report, which is affectionately named after long-term audit committee member and nationwide employee Bob Puccio. He suggested that we do this format, and we have been using it and have found it very helpful ever since. So this is a report that we use to basically give us, as far as the district, an ideal as far as the external auditor of state findings, how we have done, and do we anticipate that those findings will repeat, or have we done enough corrective actions that they should go away. Now, something could always happen, but based on, you know, our discussions and our reviews of information, this is kind of the best snapshot that we have as far as the status of what these findings will look like. It's not a lot. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Dion Brown to present the Puccio report.
Good afternoon, committee members. I would like to provide a brief update of the Auditor of State report and management letter comments for fiscal year 2019. Our office updates prior fiscal year AOS comments by identifying the finding number, the finding description, the process owner, and implementation dates. In addition, our office also determines the following: is the management corrective action plan effective? The likelihood of the AOS comments repeating in the following fiscal year? Did the comment repeat? And we also provide a brief explanation of the comments that we believe have a high likelihood of repeating in the upcoming audit. We have determined for the one report comment issued in fiscal year 2019 that there's a low likelihood of the Chrono supervisor approval of time cards repeating as a report comment in fiscal year 2020. Our office reviewed Chrono's data for all 26 pay periods for fiscal year 2020 and noted an average approval rate of 98%. Are there any questions concerning the one report comment?
That's good news.
Moving on to the management letter comments. There were a total of 3 management letter comments issued in fiscal year 2019. Our office believes that there's a high likelihood of one of the 3 comments repeating for fiscal year 2020's financial audit. The one report comment is timely deposits. Consistent application of current procedures is still an issue at the building level. Are there any questions concerning the management letter comments? Hearing none, this concludes the update of the prior year AOS comments. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening.
And Chair Ragland, that concludes the Office of Internal Audit report, as well as the financial reporting on the Puccio report. So I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Madam Auditor, and thank you, Mr. Brown, for the report. Any further questions at all from the committee? Once again, I'd like to thank you all for your diligence today. We had a pretty healthy agenda, but I think it was great information. I appreciate all of you coming and joining us today. We do have Ms. Jaquette, who is here from the superintendent's office. I wanted to make sure that you were properly recognized, but for all of you who have participated in the report and joined us from the administration, job well done. At this time, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and properly seconded that we adjourn. Madam Auditor, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant,
Yes.
Mr. Jordan,
Yes.
Chair Ragland,
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you all very much. We will see you next month.
Oh, I have one point, James.
Yes, ma'am.
We're the school board. Actually, this is worth sharing just because it's kind of exciting. And probably I should have done this before the meeting ended, but we're in the process of generating a 5-year strategic plan, and part of our effort is to go out to the community and meet with stakeholders and gain feedback that will become the basis or certainly help us inform our strategic plan. And next, the next board meeting, James and I, because we're teamed up on this one, we'll have to cut this meeting short till 5 o'clock. So when we put out the notice, Carolyn, let's make sure we say it's going to end at 5 and not at 5:30. Because we have, who is it we're going to meet? Some group needs us at 5. I can't remember who it is right now. James, do you remember?
We will, yeah, we'll get all of that squared away, Board Member Beckerly, but thank you so much for the reminder. Absolutely. We'll speak with Madam Auditor about that and make sure the committee understands the change in times. All right.
I'll make sure the agenda
Committee, and
accommodates
thank
that.
you, Madam Co-Chair. We will see you all next month.
All right.
Take care,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye now.